The scent of stale champagne and desperation clung to Liam Maxwell like a second skin. He adjusted his bow tie, the silk feeling like a noose, and glanced at the woman beside him. Serena, all sharp angles and performative laughter, squeezed his arm. "Darling, aren't you excited?" she purred, her eyes scanning the opulent ballroom of the Everglen Hotel. Tonight, his former company, Innovate Dynamics, was being celebrated. A company he'd built from the ground up, only to have it ripped from his grasp in the bitter divorce from Eleanor Vance. He'd brought Serena tonight as a deliberate, calculated move, a public display of his new life, his new love, a defiant middle finger to the past. He wanted Eleanor to see him, to regret what she'd lost. But as the double doors swung open and a hush fell over the crowd, Liam's carefully constructed facade crumbled. There, on the arm of billionaire industrialist Julian Thorne, was Eleanor. And she wasn't just walking in, she was radiating every inch the woman Liam had once loved. But now, something more. Something he could no longer touch. Liam's carefully curated evening began to unravel the moment Eleanor Vance stepped into the grand ballroom of the Everglen Hotel. The air, thick with the murmur of polite conversation and the clinking of crystal, seemed to hold its breath. Serena, ever attuned to the shifting currents of attention, stiffened beside him, her perfectly painted smile faltering. Liam, however, felt a different kind of jolt, a visceral punch to the gut that stole his breath and left him reeling. Eleanor. She was a vision, a specter from a life he'd systematically dismantled. The deep emerald gown, a waterfall of silk that shimmered under the chandeliers, was a stark contrast to the sensible tailored clothes she'd favored during their marriage. Her usually modest dark hair, now styled in elegant waves, cascaded over one shoulder, catching the light like spun moonlight. Her face, always striking in its classic beauty, held a new luminescence, a subtle confidence that hadn't been there when she was Mrs. Maxwell. But it was her eyes, those intelligent, expressive eyes he once knew so intimately, that held him captive. They sparkled with a quiet triumph, a serene power that made Serena's forced cheerfulness feel cheap and brittle by comparison. And then there was the arm she held. Not his, not ever again. Julian Thorne, the elusive tech titan, the man whose name was synonymous with innovation and immense wealth. His presence was a gravitas in itself, a quiet power that commanded respect without a single word. He was older than Eleanor, perhaps by 15 years, his silvering temples a testament to a lifetime of strategic victories, but his gaze, when it fell upon Eleanor, was unequivocally tender, possessive in the most gentlemanly way. Liam felt a cold dread seep into his bones. This wasn't just Eleanor showing up. This was Eleanor arriving with an exclamation point, a mic drop that echoed through the entire room. He'd brought Serena as his weapon, a beautiful, vivacious shield against the ghost of his past, a public declaration that he had moved on, that he was thriving. He had imagined Eleanor, perhaps, with some minor fling, a rebound artist, someone forgettable. He had even pictured her looking a little diminished. He had certainly never envisioned her like this, radiant, confident, and undeniably, irrevocably with Julian Thorne. Serena, recovering her composure, with a sharp intake of breath, leaned in. "Who is that?" she whispered, her voice laced with an unfamiliar tremor. Liam swallowed, the taste of ashes in his mouth. "My ex-wife," he managed, the words tasting like poison. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Whispers, like a silent tide, rose and fell. "Is that Eleanor Vance? With Julian Thorne? I heard she got quite a settlement from Maxwell." The words, though not directed at him, felt like tiny, precise stabs. Liam had always prided himself on his reputation, on being the man who had it all. Tonight, that carefully constructed image was crumbling around him, brick by painful brick. He watched, mesmerized and horrified, as Eleanor and Julian navigated the throng, a natural spotlight following them. She smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached her eyes as she greeted familiar faces, faces that had once been his friends, his colleagues, his investors. He saw the subtle nods of respect, the genuine warmth in their greetings. It wasn't just the Thorne name. It was Eleanor herself, reborn, amplified. "Don't look at her, Liam," Serena said, her voice a little too sharp, a little too loud. She tugged at his arm, pulling him towards the bar, a desperate attempt to reclaim his attention, to reassert her place. But his gaze remained fixed on Eleanor. He saw her laugh, a soft, melodic sound that used to fill their home, now shared with another man. He saw Julian Thorne lean in, his head close to hers, and a private smile pass between them. It was an intimacy that pierced Liam deeper than any accusation. He remembered the day she walked out, the quiet determination in her voice, the weary resignation in her eyes. He'd dismissed it then, convinced she'd come back, that she couldn't possibly survive without him, without the life he provided. He had, in his arrogance, believed himself indispensable. Now, watching her, he realized the depth of his miscalculation. She wasn't just surviving, she was flourishing, blossoming in a way she never had with him. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne flutes. Liam grabbed one, downing the sparkling wine in a single gulp, the bubbles doing little to quell the burning in his chest. Serena, sensing his withdrawal, tried to engage him, talking animatedly about the decor, the music, anything to distract him. But her words were just background noise, a meaningless hum against the deafening roar of his own regrets. He had expected to feel triumphant tonight, to see a flicker of pain or envy in Eleanor's eyes. Instead, he was the one writhing, a fish out of water, gasping for air. The roles had reversed, and the spotlight which he had so eagerly sought had been stolen, effortlessly, by the woman he had discarded. The night had just begun, and Liam Maxwell, the man who brought his mistress to an awards party, was already losing. And the bitter irony was, he knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was just the beginning of his public unraveling. The awards ceremony unfolded in a blur of polite applause and forced smiles. Liam, seated at a prominent table with Serena, found himself constantly scanning the room for Eleanor. Each time their eyes met, a fleeting, almost imperceptible moment, he saw not anger or sadness, but a calm, almost detached acknowledgement. It infuriated him. He wanted a reaction, something that would confirm his continued relevance in her world, even if it was negative. Instead, he got polite indifference, a quiet strength that unnerved him more than any outburst ever could. Serena, however, was far from indifferent. Her initial shock had morphed into a simmering resentment. She kept her arm linked through Liam's, a possessive gesture, and engaged in overly enthusiastic conversations with anyone who would listen, her voice a little too high, her laughter a little too brittle. Liam knew what she was doing, marking her territory, asserting her claim. But against the quiet elegance of Eleanor and the understated power of Julian Thorne, Serena's efforts felt performative, almost desperate. Liam's mind drifted back to the early days with Eleanor. They had met at a university lecture, two ambitious idealists with dreams of changing the world through technology. She was a brilliant software engineer, sharp-witted and pragmatic, balancing his boundless, sometimes reckless vision. Together, they had built Innovate Dynamics from a garage startup to a formidable player in the tech industry. She was his sounding board, his co-conspirator, his anchor. He had taken her ideas, refined them, and presented them as his own, often without full credit. She hadn't seemed to mind then, always more interested in the work itself than the accolades. Her passion was for creation, for the elegant lines of code that brought ideas to life. His, for the spotlight and the bottom line. Their marriage, initially fueled by shared ambition and genuine affection, had slowly eroded under the relentless demands of the company and Liam's escalating ego. He started seeing Eleanor not as an equal partner, but as an extension of his success, a supportive wife who should prioritize his needs above her own. He began to take her quiet nature for granted, mistaking her patience for passivity. Then Serena entered the picture. Young, ambitious, and utterly captivated by Liam's charisma and success, she had been an intern at Innovate Dynamics. She offered him the intoxicating cocktail of uncritical admiration and youthful adoration he now craved. Eleanor, increasingly disillusioned by Liam's emotional distance and his growing obsession with external validation, had tried to reach him. There were quiet conversations, pleas for connection, for a return to the shared dreams they once held. But Liam, basking in Serena's glow, had dismissed them as nagging, as emotional burdens he no longer had time for. The divorce had been brutal, leaving a scar on Liam's professional life. Eleanor, surprisingly, had fought for a significant portion of the company, not out of greed, but out of a fierce sense of ownership for the work she had poured her life into. Her legal team, formidable and unyielding, had presented irrefutable evidence of her integral contributions, her intellectual property, her tireless hours. Liam, blinded by his own sense of betrayal and entitlement, had underestimated her resolve. He had lost control of the company, forced to sell his shares, the bitter taste of defeat still fresh in his mouth. He now worked for a competitor, a humiliating step down that he tried desperately to conceal. As the ceremony progressed, Liam watched as Julian Thorne, a man whose empire dwarfed anything Liam had ever built or could ever hope to build, leaned over and whispered something to Eleanor. She smiled, a soft, intimate gesture, and gently touched his arm. The gesture, so natural, so tender, was a dagger to Liam's heart. He remembered Eleanor touching his arm like that, a silent communication, a comforting presence. Now it belonged to another man, a man who, unlike Liam, seemed to genuinely appreciate the quiet strength and brilliant mind that lay beneath Eleanor's composed exterior. When the award for outstanding contribution to tech innovation was announced, Liam felt a surge of pride, a fleeting moment where he thought perhaps he might still be recognized. It was an award he had coveted for years, believing it to be the ultimate validation of his vision. But the presenter's voice, clear and resonant, called out a different name. And the recipient of this year's Outstanding Contribution to Tech Innovation Award goes to Julian Thorne for his groundbreaking work with Project Chimera and to the brilliant mind behind its core algorithms, Eleanor Vance. A collective gasp swept through the room, quickly followed by a thunderous standing ovation. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. Eleanor, not just with Thorne, but with him, sharing the stage, sharing the recognition. Project Chimera. He'd heard whispers of it, a revolutionary AI initiative, but he hadn't connected Eleanor to it. His ex-wife, His quiet, underestimated ex-wife was not just surviving. She was co-piloting a project with a titan, a project that was clearly changing the landscape of their industry. Serena squeezed his arm, her nails digging into his flesh. "What is this, Liam?" she hissed, her voice barely audible over the applause. Liam could only stare, his world tilting on its axis. He watched as Eleanor, graceful and composed, ascended the stage with Julian. She accepted the award with a quiet dignity, her eyes sweeping over the crowd, finally meeting Liam's. There was no malice, no triumph, only a steady, unwavering gaze that seemed to pierce through his carefully constructed defenses. In that moment, he felt utterly, completely exposed. The architect of his own loss, standing amidst the ruins of his pride, watching the woman he'd discarded shine brighter than he ever had. The ghost of glamour had not only returned, she had taken center stage, illuminated by a spotlight Liam had once believed was exclusively his. Eleanor stood on the stage, the heavy, polished award cool against her fingertips, and felt a strange sense of unreality. The applause was deafening, a wave of sound that both exhilarated and humbled her. Beside her, Julian Thorne's hand rested briefly on her lower back, a gesture of quiet support and shared victory. His presence grounded her, a solid, reassuring anchor in the whirlwind of flashing lights and adoring gazes. Her eyes, almost involuntarily, sought Liam Maxwell in the crowd. She found him instantly, his face a mask of disbelief, Serena clinging to his arm like a lifeline. A flicker of something, not triumph, but a quiet understanding, passed through Eleanor. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about proving anything to him. This was about acknowledging her own worth, her own contributions. Finally stepping into the light she had for so long allowed him to monopolize. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, resonating through the microphone. "Thank you. It's an immense honor to stand here tonight, receiving this recognition alongside Julian Thorne." Project Chimera, she paused, a genuine smile gracing her lips, has been a labor of love, a testament to what can be achieved when brilliant minds collaborate with a shared vision. I want to especially thank my incredible team, whose tireless dedication brought our algorithms to life. She paused, glancing at Julian, a warmth in her eyes. And to Julian, for his unwavering trust, his visionary leadership, and for creating an environment where innovation truly thrives. The audience erupted again. Liam watched, every word a fresh cut. He remembered the long nights Eleanor had spent coding, her eyes bright with passion, her fingers flying across the keyboard. He remembered the countless ideas she had pitched, the solutions she had devised, the countless times he had taken those ideas, polished them, and presented them as his own, basking in the ensuing praise. He had always known she was brilliant, but he had dismissed her quiet intensity as a lack of ambition, a preference for the background. He had been so terribly, terribly wrong. As Eleanor and Julian descended the stage, they were immediately swarmed by well-wishers, industry leaders eager to congratulate them, to bask in their reflected glory. Liam watched Eleanor, animated and engaged, her laughter carrying faintly across the room. She was glowing, not just from the spotlight, but from an inner joy, a sense of accomplishment that radiated from her. Serena, however, was not content to remain in the shadows. "Liam, we should go congratulate them," she said, her voice sugary sweet, but with a sharp edge. "It would look good, darling. Professional." Liam knew it was a thinly veiled attempt to assert herself, to insert them back into the narrative. He also knew it was a terrible idea. His humiliation felt too fresh too raw. But Serena, ever persistent, was already pulling him towards the throng surrounding Eleanor and Julian. He had no choice but to follow, feeling like a lamb being led to slaughter. As they approached, a path seemed to clear, as if the crowd instinctively recognized the impending collision. Eleanor, mid-conversation with a prominent venture capitalist, looked up, her smile faltering ever so slightly as she saw Liam and Serena approaching. Julian, ever perceptive, placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "Eleanor, darling," Serena gushed, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "Congratulations, that was simply incredible. We had no idea you were involved with Project Chimera. Such a surprise." The implied dig, the suggestion that Eleanor had been hiding her brilliance, was not lost on anyone. Eleanor's smile remained polite, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, Serena. It's been a challenging but rewarding journey." Her gaze then shifted to Liam, cool and appraising. "Liam, Eleanor," he managed, his voice a little hoarse. He felt the weight of the award she held, the tangible proof of her ascent, a stark contrast to his own precipitous fall. "Congratulations. I'm truly impressed." The words felt like ash in his mouth, choked by his own pride and regret. Julian Thorne stepped forward, his presence commanding, his gaze steady and unwavering as he met Liam's. "Liam," he said, his voice deep and measured, devoid of any warmth. "It's been a while." There was no animosity, just a quiet, almost clinical assessment. Julian was not a man to waste energy on petty squabbles. He was a man of power, of results, and he clearly saw Liam as irrelevant. Serena, attempting to assert herself, chimed in. "Julian, it's such an honor to finally meet you. I'm Serena Hartley, Liam's partner." She extended a perfectly manicured hand, expecting a moment of recognition, a flicker of interest. Julian's gaze briefly flickered to Serena, a polite, almost dismissive nod. He took her hand, a brief, firm shake. Then his attention returned to Eleanor, his focus unwavering. It was a subtle but devastating snub, and Serena's forced smile tightened. The conversation that followed was an excruciating dance of polite superficiality. Liam felt increasingly like an outsider, a ghost at his own wake. He heard snippets of conversation around them, about Project Chimera's potential, about Julian's philanthropic ventures, about Eleanor's growing reputation in the AI field. He realized, with a sickening clarity, that he was no longer a part of this world, this elite circle of true innovators. He was merely an observer, relegated to the periphery, a relic of a past that Eleanor had gracefully, powerfully transcended. As they finally excused themselves, Liam felt a profound sense of exhaustion, a soul-deep weariness that had nothing to do with the late hour. He had come to the party to make a statement, to prove his resurgence, to diminish Eleanor. Instead, he had been diminished, exposed, and utterly eclipsed. Walking away, Serena's grip on his arm was no longer possessive, but almost desperate. Her initial triumph at being Liam's date had curdled into a bitter resentment. She had wanted to be seen as the new, glamorous Mrs. Maxwell. But Eleanor had effortlessly stolen the spotlight, not with malice, but with sheer, undeniable brilliance. The weight of the gold award in Eleanor's hands felt heavier than any burden Liam had ever carried, for it represented not just her success, but the painful, irrefutable proof of his own profound, self-inflicted loss. The party continued, but for Liam, the celebration had ended, leaving behind only the cold ashes of his shattered pride. The drive home was suffocatingly silent. Serena, usually effervescent, was subdued. her earlier vivacity replaced by a palpable tension. Liam, still reeling from the evening's events, stared out the window at the blurred city lights, each flash a painful reminder of Eleanor's dazzling ascent. He could feel Serena's anger radiating beside him, a silent accusation that he knew he deserved. Finally, as they pulled into the driveway of his sleek modern home, a home he now struggled to maintain after the divorce settlement, Serena broke the silence. "That was humiliating, Liam," she stated, her voice tight with suppressed fury. "You told me she was insignificant. You told me she was just a bitter ex-wife, clinging to your coattails." Liam flinched. "She was," he retorted, though even as he said it, the lie tasted stale. "She's obviously just riding on Thorne's reputation. Everyone knows he backs promising projects." "Don't insult my intelligence, Liam," Serena snapped, turning to face him, her eyes flashing. "Did you see her up there? Did you hear the applause? That wasn't just for Thorne. That was for her. She's not just some disgruntled ex. She's a force. And you made me look like an absolute fool by parading me around as if I was some kind of trophy." Her words, though harsh, were undeniably true. Liam had indeed seen Serena as a trophy, a visible symbol of his supposed recovery, his new life. He had underestimated Eleanor, and in doing so, he had dragged Serena into his bitter drama, exposing her to the very humiliation he had sought to inflict on his ex-wife. "This was never about you, Serena," Liam said, rubbing his temples, a headache blooming behind his eyes. "This was about business." "Business?" Serena scoffed, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. "Your business tonight was making me feel like a consolation prize. Everyone in that room knows you're struggling, Liam. They know she walked away with half of Innovate Dynamics, and now she's working with Julian Thorne, while you're... What? Trying to make a comeback at a lesser company?" The brutal honesty of her words stung, each syllable a confirmation of his deepest fears. He was struggling. He was clawing his way back, trying to rebuild an empire that had crumbled not just financially, but ethically. The divorce had exposed his cutthroat tactics, his tendency to take credit, his casual disregard for Eleanor's contributions. His reputation, once pristine, was now tarnished, whispered about in boardrooms and industry conferences. "I'm doing fine," Liam said defensively, his voice lacking conviction. "Are you?" Serena challenged, her gaze piercing. "Because tonight, it certainly didn't look like it. You were seething. You were obsessed with her. And frankly, it's exhausting, Liam. I'm not here to be a prop in your revenge fantasy." Her words hit him hard. He had been so consumed by his own wounded pride, his desire to prove himself, that he hadn't considered Serena's perspective, her feelings. He had used her, and now she was calling him out on it. The echo of his betrayal, once directed at Eleanor, now reverberated in his relationship with Serena. The argument escalated as they entered the house, the sterile, modern interior feeling cold and unwelcoming. Serena accused him of being emotionally unavailable, of being consumed by his past, of using her as a distraction. Liam, defensive and wounded, lashed out, accusing her of being shallow, of only caring about appearances. The ugly truths they hurled at each other revealed the cracks that had always been present in their superficial relationship, now gaping chasms. Finally, Serena threw her hands up in exasperation. "You know what, Liam? I'm tired. I'm tired of competing with a ghost. I'm tired of being second best to your obsession with Eleanor. You can sort yourself out." With that, she turned and walked away, not to her usual guest room, but to the front door. "Serena, where are you going?" Liam called out, a flicker of panic rising within him. He hadn't expected this. She paused at the threshold, her hand on the doorknob. Somewhere where I'm not constantly reminded of someone else's past and your inability to move on. Goodbye, Liam. The door clicked shut, leaving Liam standing alone in the silent, empty house. The echo of the closing door was louder than any of Serena's angry words. He was truly alone now. His mistress, his carefully chosen symbol of his new life, had walked out, leaving him to confront the wreckage of his own making. He sank onto the plush leather sofa, the silence pressing in on him, amplifying the chaos in his mind. He thought of Eleanor, her radiant smile, her confident bearing, her shared victory with Julian Thorne. He thought of Serena's accusations, her stark portrayal of his current reality. And then he thought of himself, the man who had once believed he was invincible, the man who had discarded genuine love and partnership for fleeting admiration and superficial thrills. The bitter taste of regret filled his mouth. A familiar companion he had tried to drown out with ambition and distraction. He had orchestrated his own downfall, meticulously dismantling the very foundations of his happiness and success. Tonight, at the awards party, he hadn't just lost the spotlight. He had lost everything that truly mattered. And for the first time in a very long time, Liam Maxwell felt not just anger or pride, but a profound, aching emptiness that resonated with the silence of his now empty home. The echo of betrayal wasn't just in Serena's words, it was in the hollow chambers of his own heart. Weeks turned into months, each one heavier than the last for Liam. The public humiliation at the awards party had reverberated throughout his professional sphere. Deals became harder to close, investors more hesitant, and the whispers about his integrity grew louder. Serena's departure had left a void, but it was not the emotional void of a lost love. It was the chilling realization that he was truly, utterly alone. The superficial comfort she provided was gone, leaving him to confront the ghost of his past, the ghost of Eleanor. He found himself frequently scrolling through news articles, industry reports, anything that mentioned Project Chimera. Each mention of Eleanor Vance and Julian Thorne together, each new milestone announced by their company, felt like a fresh wound. He devoured every detail, a morbid fascination taking hold. He saw photos of Eleanor at conferences, giving presentations with an authority and confidence he had never truly acknowledged in her. She was not just thriving, she was soaring, her intellectual prowess finally recognized and celebrated. Liam's own work suffered. His new role at Vertex Solutions, a competitor to Innovate Dynamics, felt like a constant reminder of his demotion. He found it difficult to focus, his mind constantly replaying scenes from his marriage, dissecting where it all went wrong. He recalled the early days, their shared passion, the late nights fueled by coffee and dreams. He remembered Eleanor's quiet strength, her unwavering belief in his vision, even when he doubted himself. He remembered the moment he started to take her for granted, to see her contributions as secondary, to dismiss her emotional needs as inconvenient. He saw the turning point clearly now, the launch of Innovate Dynamics' flagship product, Nexus. It had been Eleanor's brainchild, her algorithms forming its core. Yet, in the grand unveiling, Liam had hogged the spotlight, barely mentioning her name, reveling in the applause as if he had conjured the entire marvel from thin air. He remembered the look on her face that night, a subtle flicker of disappointment in her eyes, quickly masked by a polite smile. He'd dismissed it then, too drunk on his own success to notice the quiet erosion of their bond. The power imbalance, which had slowly seeped into their professional relationship, had inevitably poisoned their personal one. He had become accustomed to her quiet support, to her tireless work behind the scenes, always ensuring his success. He had ceased to see her as an equal partner, and instead as a supportive wife whose primary role was to facilitate his ambition. His ambition, however, had blinded him to the genuine connection, the deep respect that had once bound them. One evening, unable to bear the silence of his home, Liam found himself in his study, surrounded by relics of his former life. Framed awards from Innovate Dynamics, photos of him shaking hands with powerful figures, and a single, almost forgotten photograph on his desk. It was an old picture, taken shortly after their wedding. Eleanor, radiant in a simple white dress, laughing, her arm linked through his, her eyes full of hope and uncomplicated joy. He looked at himself in the photo, younger, more innocent, a genuine smile on his face, unmarred by the cynicism and ambition that would later consume him. He picked up the photo, his fingers tracing Eleanor's smiling face. He remembered the dreams they had shared then, simple dreams of building something meaningful together, of making a difference. He remembered the feeling of genuine partnership, of knowing someone had his back, not out of obligation, but out of shared purpose and love. It was a stark contrast to the transactional nature of his relationships now, particularly with Serena, which had dissolved so easily when he no longer served her purpose. A wave of profound regret washed over him. It wasn't just the loss of the company, or the public humiliation, or even Serena's departure. It was the loss of Eleanor, the vibrant, brilliant woman he had once loved and respected, the woman he had actively pushed away. He had traded genuine connection for fleeting admiration, substance for superficiality, and in doing so, he had lost the most valuable thing he had ever possessed: a true partner, an equal, a soulmate. He closed his eyes, the image of Eleanor on stage, with Julian Thorne, vivid in his mind. He saw the respect in Julian's eyes, the way he genuinely listened to her, the way he seemed to value her contributions as much as his own. It was a stark reminder of what he had forfeited, a painful lesson in the true meaning of partnership, the unspoken chapters of their life together, the ones he had neglected to write, the moments he had dismissed as insignificant, now clamored for his attention. He remembered her gentle criticisms, her quiet suggestions, all designed to make their company better, to make him better. He had seen them as challenges to his authority, as signs of her discontent, rather than as expressions of her care and dedication. Liam spent the rest of the night poring over old blueprints, design documents, and meeting minutes from Innovate Dynamics. He saw her fingerprints everywhere, her elegant coding, her insightful analyses. He saw the projects he had taken full credit for, projects that were undeniably hers in their genesis. The evidence of his appropriation was overwhelming, undeniable. He had not just taken her for granted, he had actively erased her contributions, weaving a narrative where he was the sole genius. He realized, with a chilling clarity, that Eleanor's success with Julian Thorne wasn't just a new chapter, it was the continuation of a story he had tried to silence, a story of profound talent and unwavering dedication that had finally found its rightful audience, its rightful stage. And he, Liam Maxwell, the architect of his own loss, was left with nothing but the echoing silence of his regrets and the painful, undeniable truth of the unspoken chapters he had selfishly chosen to ignore. The facade Liam had so meticulously constructed began to crumble in earnest. His performance at Vertex Solutions suffered, his once sharp mind clouded by a relentless cycle of regret and self-recrimination. He found himself lashing out at colleagues, missing deadlines, and making increasingly reckless decisions. His boss, David Chen, a shrewd but patient man, eventually called him into his office. "Liam," David began, his tone measured, "we need to talk. Your numbers are down, your team is reporting morale issues, and frankly, your focus isn't where it needs to be." Liam bristled, his immediate reaction defensive. "I'm dealing with some personal matters, David. It won't affect my work long term." David leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "Unfortunately, Liam, it already has. And frankly, it's impacting the entire department. I've heard the whispers, Liam. Everyone knows about your divorce, about Eleanor Vance, about Project Chimera. It's hard to ignore when your ex-wife is dominating the headlines with a groundbreaking AI initiative while you're here." The last three words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken judgment. Liam felt a flush of shame creep up his neck. He was here, at a company that, while respectable, was undeniably a step down from the empire he had built. He was here, struggling to maintain a semblance of his former glory, while Eleanor was scaling new heights. "I'm doing my best," Liam muttered, avoiding David's gaze. "Your best isn't good enough right now, Liam," David said, his voice firm. "You were hired here because of your past success, your reputation at Innovate Dynamics. But what made you successful then seems to be hindering you now. This obsession with Eleanor Vance, it's consuming you." Liam wanted to deny it, to dismiss it as professional jealousy, but he couldn't. The truth of David's words pierced through his defenses. He was consumed. Every waking moment, Eleanor's success, her radiant presence, Julian Thorne's quiet power, it all played on a loop in his mind, a constant, agonizing reminder of what he had lost. "What do you want me to do, David?" Liam asked, his voice tight. David sighed, a genuine note of concern in his voice. "I want you to get your head straight, Liam. I want you to focus on your work, on your team. I want you to let go of the past. If you can't, then I'm afraid this isn't going to work out." It was an ultimatum, delivered with a quiet resignation that somehow felt more devastating than a fiery outburst. Liam knew David was right. He was teetering on the brink of another professional disaster, and this time there would be no safety net, no familiar empire to fall back on. Leaving David's office, Liam felt a profound sense of despair. He had always prided himself on his control, on his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. Now, he felt utterly powerless, watching his life unravel thread by painful thread. That evening, he went home, not to the sterile modern house that felt too large and too empty, but to his old apartment, the one he had owned before Innovate Dynamics took off, before the opulence and the grandeur. It was smaller, cozier, filled with a few old books and a worn armchair. He sat there, surrounded by the ghosts of his simpler past, a time before ambition had twisted his values. He scrolled through his phone, not for news, but for something else, something he hadn't looked at in years. Old social media posts, archived photos. He found pictures of Eleanor and him, young and vibrant, at company picnics, at small industry gatherings, before the awards and the accolades. He saw her genuine smile, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, a subtle deference to him that he had once taken as admiration, but now recognized as a quiet respect for his initial vision. He remembered a particular conversation early in their marriage. They were working late, fueled by takeout coffee, debating a complex coding problem. Eleanor had a breakthrough, a brilliant solution that streamlined their entire process. He remembered the thrill of it, the shared excitement, the genuine joy of collaborative creation. He had instinctively reached for her hand, squeezing it, his heart filled with a warmth that went beyond professional success. In that moment, they were simply two brilliant minds, united by a common purpose, deeply connected. But then, the next morning, he had presented her solution as his own, eager to impress investors. He'd even hinted that Eleanor had merely assisted. He saw her flinch, a barely perceptible tightening around her mouth, but she hadn't said anything. She had always been the quiet strength, the one who prioritized the work over personal glory. He had exploited that. He had systematically undermined her, not with malice, but with a casual disregard that was perhaps even more cruel. The unraveling thread of his life wasn't just a professional crisis. It was a crisis of identity, a moral reckoning. He saw himself for who he had truly become, not the visionary he aspired to be, but a man who built his success on the backs of others, a man who prioritized ego over integrity, superficiality over genuine connection. The silence of the apartment was no longer empty. It was filled with the cacophony of his own guilt, the echoes of his past mistakes. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that he couldn't continue down this path. The unraveling thread of his life was about to snap, leaving him with nothing but broken pieces. He needed to find a way to mend it, not just for his career, but for his very soul. And that, he realized, would require a level of honesty and humility he had never before possessed. The journey to redemption, he knew, would be far more arduous than any professional climb he had ever undertaken. The journey to self-reflection was a solitary and painful one for Liam. He took David Chen's ultimatum to heart, not just as a threat to his job, but as a stark warning about the direction his entire life was heading. He started by cutting himself off from the constant influx of news about Eleanor and Project Chimera. He unfollowed industry accounts, avoided tech journals, and forced himself to focus solely on his current work at Vertex Solutions. It was difficult, like a drug addict weaning himself off a powerful addiction, but he knew it was necessary. He also began to actively listen to his team. He asked for their input, genuinely considered their suggestions, and gave credit where credit was due. It was awkward at first. His team, accustomed to his autocratic style, eyed him with suspicion. But slowly, gradually, a subtle shift occurred. He saw the flicker of respect in their eyes when he acknowledged their efforts, the genuine enthusiasm when he incorporated their ideas. It was a small victory, but it was a start. Beyond work, Liam sought professional help. He found a therapist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman with a calm demeanor and an incisive mind. In their sessions, he began to unpack years of buried insecurities, of the gnawing need for external validation that had driven his ambition to destructive extremes. He spoke about his childhood, his emotionally distant father, his desperate desire to prove himself. He spoke about Eleanor, their early days, and his gradual descent into entitlement and arrogance. "You built something incredible with Eleanor, Liam," Dr. Reed observed during one session. "But then you started to believe it was only yours, and when she asserted her own worth, it felt like a threat to your identity." Liam nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I couldn't stand the idea of her being successful without me, of her not needing me." "It wasn't about her needing you, Liam," Dr. Reed gently corrected. "It was about you needing to control the narrative, to be the sole protagonist." The truth of her words resonated deeply. He had been so afraid of being ordinary, of not being exceptional, that he had extinguished the light of those around him, particularly Eleanor, to make his own shine brighter. He saw now that true strength came not from dimming others, but from empowering them, from acknowledging their brilliance. One evening, after a particularly grueling session with Dr. Reed, Liam found himself walking aimlessly through the city. He passed a small independent bookstore, a place he and Eleanor used to frequent in their university days. He paused, a wave of nostalgia washing over him. They would spend hours browsing the shelves, discussing obscure philosophies, sharing their dreams. It was a time of intellectual curiosity, of shared passion, before the pressures of ambition had corrupted their purity. He stepped inside, the familiar scent of old paper and coffee enveloping him. He wandered through the aisles, his fingers tracing the spines of books. He found himself in the science and technology section, and a particular title caught his eye. A new book on the ethical implications of advanced AI, co-authored by Julian Thorne and Eleanor Vance. His heart gave a painful lurch. He hesitated and then picked up the book. Her name, bold and clear on the cover, felt like a powerful statement. He flipped through the pages, seeing her meticulous research, her insightful arguments. It wasn't just about coding. It was about shaping the future, about ethical responsibility. He remembered her passion for the philosophical side of technology, a passion he had dismissed as academic and impractical. Now it was her strength, her contribution to a broader, more meaningful conversation. He bought the book, a quiet acknowledgement of her continued growth, her undeniable impact. He read it cover to cover over the next few days, not with resentment, but with a growing sense of respect. He saw the depth of her thought, the clarity of her vision, the integrity that permeated every page. She wasn't just a brilliant engineer, she was a thoughtful leader, a true visionary. His work at Vertex Solutions slowly began to improve. He was more collaborative, more engaged, and his team responded positively. He wasn't back to his former glory, but he was building something new, something with integrity. He even initiated a small internal project, giving full credit to a junior developer for its core idea, mentoring them through its execution. The satisfaction he felt from seeing someone else shine, from genuinely contributing to their growth, was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It was a different kind of success, a quieter, more meaningful one. He still thought of Eleanor, but the thoughts were no longer laced with bitterness or envy. They were tinged with a profound regret for what he had lost, but also with a growing sense of appreciation for the remarkable woman she was. He recognized that her success was not a personal affront, but a testament to her inherent brilliance, a brilliance he had been too blind, too consumed by his own ego to fully acknowledge and cherish. Liam was slowly, painfully, planting the seeds of his own redemption. It was a long, arduous process, shedding years of ingrained arrogance and self-deception. He knew he might never regain what he had lost with Eleanor, that some bridges were burned beyond repair. But he also knew that he had to try. Not for her, not for his career, but for himself, to become the man he once was, before ambition had twisted his soul, and perhaps a better man than he had ever been. The path was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Liam Maxwell felt a flicker of hope, a quiet determination to rewrite the narrative of his life, not as a story of a fallen titan, but as a journey of a man who finally found his way back to himself. Months later, Liam found himself attending a smaller, more intimate industry networking event. It was a far cry from the glittering awards ceremony at the Everglen, a deliberate choice on his part to avoid the high-stakes, ego-driven environments that had once fueled his ambition. He was there to genuinely connect, to learn, to contribute, not to compete. His work at Vertex Solutions was steadily improving, and David Chen had recently praised his renewed focus and collaborative spirit. Liam was still rebuilding, but the foundations felt solid, built on humility rather than hubris. He was in the middle of a discussion about sustainable AI development when he felt a familiar tremor. A hush fell over a small cluster of people near the entrance, and a wave of quiet admiration rippled through the room. Liam's gaze was drawn, almost instinctively, to the source. There she was, Eleanor Vance. She wasn't with Julian Thorne this time, but with a group of animated young developers, her posture relaxed, a genuine smile illuminating her face. She was dressed elegantly but simply, a dark pantsuit that exuded quiet authority. Her presence still commanded attention, but it was a different kind of attention now, not the shock of the unexpected, but the respectful recognition of a celebrated mind. Liam felt a familiar tightness in his chest, but it was different this time. Less of a burning resentment, more of a quiet ache of nostalgia, of what-ifs. He noticed the way the young developers leaned in when she spoke, absorbing her words, their faces alight with inspiration. He saw the genuine warmth in her interactions, the way she made each person feel seen and heard. It was a stark contrast to his own past behavior, where he often saw junior colleagues as rungs on his ladder to success. He considered avoiding her. The memory of their last encounter, his public humiliation, still smarted. But something had shifted within him. He no longer felt the desperate need to prove himself, to compete. He felt a quiet resolve, a desire, perhaps, for closure, for a chance to acknowledge the person she had become and the person he was striving to be. Taking a deep breath, Liam walked towards her. He moved slowly, deliberately, giving her time to notice him. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a sound that stirred a long-dormant tenderness within him. Then, her eyes met his. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a fleeting ghost of past pain. But then, it settled into a polite, composed expression. There was no anger, no triumph, just a calm acknowledgement. "Eleanor," Liam said, his voice a little softer than he intended. "Liam," she replied, her voice steady, betraying no emotion. The young developers around her grew quiet, sensing the unspoken history between them. He hesitated, searching for the right words. He had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind, envisioning grand apologies, eloquent explanations. But now, faced with her quiet strength, all those grand gestures felt hollow. I wanted to congratulate you again," he began, gesturing vaguely towards the conversation about AI ethics. "On the book, on Project Chimera, you've truly built something remarkable." He tried to infuse his voice with genuine sincerity, to convey the profound shift in his perspective. Eleanor's gaze softened slightly, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Thank you, Liam. It's been a collective effort." He shifted his weight, suddenly feeling awkward, acutely aware of the onlookers. I wanted to apologize." The words came out in a rush, a quiet confession that felt both liberating and terrifying. For everything. For the way I treated you. For taking your work for granted. For taking you for granted. I was a different person then. A worse person." Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable. She didn't interrupt, didn't interject with accusations or anger. She simply listened, her eyes searching his, as if looking for the truth behind his words. "I've been doing a lot of reflection," Liam continued, his voice gaining a quiet earnestness. "And I see now how much I truly cost you. Not just financially, but emotionally, professionally. You deserved so much more. You deserved to be recognized for your brilliance then, just as you are now." A faint, almost imperceptible tremor passed through Eleanor's lips. He saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not pain, not anger, but a deep, long-buried weariness. "It took you a long time to see that, Liam," she said, her voice soft, but with an underlying steel. "A very long time." "I know," he replied, his gaze unwavering, "and I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But I felt I had to say it, to acknowledge it, for my own peace, if nothing else." Eleanor was silent for a moment, her eyes fixed on his. The young developers, sensing the gravity of the moment, had quietly dispersed, giving them space. It was just Liam and Eleanor, standing amidst the hum of the networking event, facing the weight of their shared past. "The past is the past, Liam," she finally said, her voice a little warmer than before. "It's about what you do with it now." A small, hopeful spark ignited within Liam. "I'm trying," he admitted, a genuine vulnerability in his voice. "I'm really trying to be better, to work with integrity, to appreciate the people around me." Eleanor offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "That's all anyone can do, Liam. Keep trying." She didn't offer absolution, didn't extend a hand of friendship, and Liam didn't expect her to. But there was a quiet acceptance in her tone, a recognition of his effort. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a step, a tentative, fragile step towards genuine redemption. As she turned to rejoin her colleagues, a sense of lightness, almost peace, settled over Liam. The weight he had carried for so long, the burden of unspoken guilt, had finally begun to lift. The chance encounter had not led to a dramatic reunion, but to something far more profound, a quiet acknowledgement of his past wrongs, and a fragile, hopeful glimpse into a future where he could finally, truly, begin to heal. The encounter with Eleanor, though brief and devoid of any dramatic resolution, had a profound impact on Liam. It solidified his commitment to genuine change. He found a new resolve, a quiet strength that emanated from within, rather than from external validation. He continued his therapy, delving deeper into the roots of his ambition and insecurity. He focused diligently on his work at Vertex Solutions, not striving for individual glory, but for collaborative success. He became a mentor, a leader who empowered his team, genuinely celebrating their achievements. One afternoon, Liam received an unexpected call from David Chen. "Liam, I need you to come to my office. We have a situation." David's voice was grave, sending a chill down Liam's spine. When Liam arrived, David was seated at his desk, a grim expression on his face, a thick file open before him. "Liam, this concerns Innovate Dynamics, specifically some discrepancies related to their early patents, particularly those surrounding the core algorithms of Nexus." Liam felt a cold dread seep into his bones. Nexus, Eleanor's brainchild. "What kind of discrepancies?" Liam asked, his voice barely a whisper. David pushed the file across the desk. "An anonymous whistleblower has come forward. They've provided irrefutable evidence that a significant portion of the foundational code for Nexus and several subsequent patents were not only developed by Eleanor Vance, but that your name was explicitly added to her patent applications without her full knowledge or consent, and her contributions were systematically downplayed, even erased, in official documentation." Liam stared at the documents, his blood running cold. It was all there. Meticulously documented emails, internal memos, earlier drafts of patent applications, with Eleanor's name as the primary inventor, later altered, always with Liam's name elevated. The whistleblower had been thorough, providing a damning trail of evidence. He recognized some of the handwriting, some of the timestamps. It was all true. All the subtle ways he had appropriated her work, twisted the narrative, now laid bare, undeniable. The whistleblower also claims that this was a pattern, not an isolated incident, David continued, his voice devoid of judgment, simply stating the facts. That your entire career at Innovate Dynamics was built, in large part, on her unacknowledged intellectual property. The room spun. Liam felt a wave of nausea. He had known, in the quiet corners of his mind, the extent of his appropriation. But to see it laid out so meticulously, so coldly, so undeniably, was devastating. He had systematically stolen from the woman he claimed to love, the woman who had trusted him implicitly. The betrayal, which he had been trying to atone for in his private therapy sessions, was now a public, tangible truth, ready to explode. "This is going to be big, Liam," David said, his voice lowering. "The whistleblower plans to go public with this, and when they do, it will not only implicate you, but it will undoubtedly shake Innovate Dynamics to its core, and by extension, potentially impact Project Chimera due to the foundational tech." Liam buried his face in his hands, the weight of his past crashing down on him. This wasn't just about his reputation anymore. This was about Eleanor, about her legacy, about the potential fallout for the groundbreaking work she was now doing. He had not just wronged her personally, he had committed a professional theft, a systemic deception that could now unravel everything she had built again. "Who is the whistleblower?" Liam finally managed, his voice hoarse. David hesitated. "The identity is protected, but I can tell you this much. They're a former senior developer from Innovate Dynamics, someone who witnessed your behavior firsthand and felt a moral obligation to bring it to light." Liam thought of the many talented individuals he had worked with, many of whom had quietly left Innovate Dynamics after Eleanor's departure, disillusioned by his leadership. Any one of them could be the whistleblower, and he deserved it. A profound sense of inevitability settled over Liam. This was the consequence of his actions, the chickens finally coming home to roost. The carefully buried truths, the unspoken chapters he had tried to ignore, were now being unveiled, not just to him, but to the entire world. His journey to redemption, which had been a private struggle, was about to become a very public reckoning. He looked at David, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for guidance. "What do I do?" David closed the file. "You have a choice, Liam. You can try to fight this, to deny it, but the evidence is compelling. Or you can acknowledge the truth, take responsibility, and try, in some small way, to make amends." The choice was clear, agonizingly so. Liam had spent months trying to become a better man. Now he faced the ultimate test, to confront his past, to admit his lies, and to finally truly pay the price for the truth he had so long suppressed. The unveiling of truth was not just a threat, it was an opportunity, however painful, for genuine, profound redemption. And this time, he knew he couldn't run. The revelation of the whistleblower's evidence sent shockwaves through the tech industry. The story broke, not as a whisper, but as a thunderclap across major news outlets. Innovate Dynamics in scandal. CEO accused of intellectual property theft from ex-wife screamed the headlines. The carefully curated image of Liam Maxwell as a visionary founder shattered, replaced by the grim reality of a deceitful opportunist. Liam, following David Chen's advice, made the difficult decision to face the truth head-on. He resigned from Vertex Solutions, issuing a public statement that was as raw and honest as he could manage. He admitted to systematically downplaying Eleanor's contributions, to appropriating her intellectual property, and to fostering a culture of entitlement that ultimately led to his downfall. It was a painful, humiliating confession, but as he wrote it, he felt a strange, almost liberating sense of relief. The burden of the lie, which he had carried for so long, was finally lifted. The media frenzy was intense. Pundits debated his legacy, former colleagues expressed their disappointment, and online forums erupted with vitriol. Serena, not surprisingly, was quick to distance herself, releasing a statement about her ignorance of Liam's past actions. He received no calls of support, no messages of comfort. He was truly alone in his public reckoning. Meanwhile, the impact on Eleanor and Project Chimera was significant. While the core algorithms were undeniably hers, the entanglement with Innovate Dynamics and Liam's past actions created legal complexities. News reports initially questioned the integrity of the foundational technology, fearing it might be tainted by the scandal. Julian Thorne, however, was a formidable ally. He swiftly and unequivocally vouched for Eleanor, releasing a statement that not only confirmed her singular brilliance, but also expressed his unwavering support and trust. He initiated an independent audit of Project Chimera's intellectual property, publicly vowing to ensure full transparency and rectify any historical injustices. Eleanor, maintaining her characteristic composure, addressed the media with grace and dignity. She acknowledged the painful truth of Liam's actions, but focused on the future, on the integrity of her work, and on the ethical development of AI. She never once expressed bitterness or anger towards Liam, choosing instead to channel her energy into protecting Project Chimera and reaffirming her commitment to its mission. Her quiet strength, her unwavering focus, further solidified her reputation as a formidable leader and a woman of immense integrity. Liam watched from the sidelines, a silent observer of the chaos he had wrought. He saw Eleanor once again, navigating a storm with an unwavering compass. He felt a profound regret, not just for the damage he had done to his own life, but for the additional burden he had placed on hers. He began the slow, arduous process of making amends. He reached out to Eleanor's lawyers, offering full cooperation in any legal proceedings related to the past intellectual property. He waived any remaining claims from their divorce settlement, insisting that all assets tied to Innovate Dynamics be meticulously re-evaluated and any portion demonstrably hers be transferred to her. It was a drop in the ocean compared to the years of appropriation, but it was a start. One quiet afternoon, he received an unexpected email. It was from Eleanor. His heart pounded as he opened it. The email was short, formal, but not devoid of a quiet acknowledgement. She thanked him for his cooperation with the legal teams and for his public statement. She didn't offer forgiveness, didn't hint at reconciliation. But at the end, there was a single sentence that stopped him cold. "I hope this allows you to truly begin anew, Liam." It wasn't absolution, but it was a release, a quiet acknowledgement of his journey, an unspoken permission to move forward. It was, in its own way, an act of profound grace. Liam closed his laptop, tears stinging his eyes. He had lost everything: his company, his reputation, his relationships. But in the process, he had found something far more valuable: himself. He had peeled back the layers of ego and ambition, revealing the insecure, flawed man beneath. And in that raw honesty, he found the seeds of genuine redemption. He knew the road ahead would be long. He would have to rebuild his life from the ground up, not on a foundation of deception, but on one of integrity and humility. He would likely never achieve the same level of public acclaim, but he no longer craved it. His true success, he realized, would lie in living a life of purpose, of honest contribution, and of truly valuing the people around him. The awards party, where he had brought his mistress to humiliate his ex-wife, had ironically become the catalyst for his deepest reckoning. Eleanor, by simply being herself, by shining in her own light, had exposed the darkness within him. And in that exposure, in that painful unveiling of truth, Liam Maxwell found his first tentative steps towards true redemption. He would carry the scars of his past, but for the first time in a very long time, he felt capable of facing the future, not as a titan, but as a man, finally, truly free. The dramatic twist of Eleanor's arrival with Julian Thorne at the awards party wasn't just a moment of public humiliation for Liam, it was the catalyst that ignited a cascade of revelations, slowly unraveling his meticulously constructed life. From the echo of betrayal in Serena's departure to the devastating unveiling of his intellectual property theft, Liam's journey became a poignant exploration of power, ego, and the true cost of unbridled ambition. His path to redemption, arduous and public, forced him to confront his deepest flaws and embrace a humility he never knew he possessed. This story reminds us that true success isn't measured in accolades or wealth, but in integrity, self-awareness, and the courage to face our past to build a more honest future. What do you think about Liam's journey? Have you ever witnessed such a dramatic turn of events? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more compelling stories.